The wind tugged at the rusted chain-link fence of the Willow Ridge Animal Shelter, carrying with it the scent of early spring and damp concrete. Inside, a quiet hum of barking and shuffling paws filled the air, but one kennel remained still. Large German Shepherd sat perfectly calm in his run, watching with amber eyes as people passed by, his ears twitching at every laugh, every squeaky shoe. His name, as written in peeling marker on the laminated card clipped to the front of his gate, was Ranger. Ranger didn't bark anymore. He'd learned it didn't help. People liked loud dogs until they scared them. And Ranger was big, too serious looking, too much. He'd been in the shelter for 93 days, and then she came. The girl in the yellow raincoat stood near the entrance, clutching her mother's hand with thin fingers. Her hood was pulled up even, though it wasn't raining anymore. Her eyes, huge and dark, scanned the room, but her lips didn't move. Not once. Mrs. Langford bent down beside her daughter and spoke softly. "We don't have to stay long, sweetie. Just take a look. We're only visiting, okay?" The girl nodded once. Her name was Lena, and she hadn't spoken in over a year, not since the accident. The volunteers gave them a tour, showing eager beagles and tail-wagging retrievers. But Lena's gaze drifted toward the far corner of the shelter, where Ranger sat behind his glass door, head tilted slightly. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He simply watched. When Lena approached, Ranger stood, tail thumping once. Mrs. Langford looked up at the volunteer. "What about this one?" "Oh, Ranger?" The woman hesitated. "He's a sweetheart, truly, but he's a bit much for some families. He's big, protective, ex-police, actually. Needs structure, not everyone can handle him." Lena stepped closer to the door. Her fingers reached out and pressed lightly against the glass. Ranger mirrored her, pressing his nose to the same spot. They stayed like that for nearly 5 minutes, still, quiet, breathing together, and then Lena turned. She didn't speak, but she did something she hadn't done in months. She smiled. Mrs. Langford wasn't sure what had happened, but by the next morning, Ranger was in the back seat of their car, wrapped in a red blanket and chewing gently on a rubber bone the shelter had given them. He adjusted quickly to home life, as if he'd been waiting for it his entire life. His crate became his den, and he didn't need much, just a place to lie down near Lena, a bowl of water, and the occasional ear scratch. Lena, for her part, was transformed. She still didn't speak, but she spent every waking moment with Ranger, drawing him in her sketchbook, sitting beside him while reading silently, even sleeping on the rug next to his bed on the first night. And when nightmares came, as they often did, Ranger was there before her mother could even reach the room. He lay across her chest until the shaking stopped. Day by day, a change began. Lena started humming, just a little, while brushing Ranger or while feeding him, one kibble at a time, patiently from her palm. Her therapists called it a breakthrough. Mrs. Langford called it a miracle. She didn't know how to explain it, only that the big German Shepherd had reached her daughter in a way no one else could. One Sunday morning, Lena and her mother walked to the park. It was the first time in months. They'd tried something so public. Ranger walked beside them on a short leash, head held high, his vest marking him as a support animal. Lena held the leash like it was a lifeline. Children played. Swings creaked. Dogs barked. Lena flinched at the noise, her grip tightening, but Ranger pressed close to her leg, grounding her. A little boy approached, pointing. "Cool dog. Does he do tricks?" Lena looked at her mother. Then, to everyone's shock, she knelt beside Ranger, held up 2 fingers and whispered, "Sit." The word was hoarse, barely there, but it was a word. Ranger sat instantly. The boy laughed. "Awesome. What else can he do?" Lena didn't say anything else. Not yet. But the dam had cracked. Her mother stood frozen behind her, tears filling her eyes. Ranger looked up at Lena with quiet pride. He didn't wag, he didn't bark, but in that one perfect moment, he became the bridge between silence and voice. As the days passed, Lena's bond with Ranger deepened in ways that couldn't be easily explained. It wasn't just the silence that bound them, but the understanding. The subtle communication they shared was something between looks, nudges, and the occasional quiet hum. Lena's speech therapist, Dr. Harper, watched in amazement during their weekly sessions. The bond between the girl and her German shepherd was undeniable, a force that filled the room in ways words never could. Dr. Harper had worked with Lena for months, encouraging her to try speaking again, to face the trauma that had stolen her voice. But it was Ranger who seemed to have unlocked something deeper within her. Each session now began with Lena sitting on the floor with Ranger at her side. She would gently hold his paw, a sign of the unspoken connection between them, and Dr. Harper would patiently wait, knowing that words, real words, were still a challenge for Lena. Today, Dr. Harper was more hopeful than usual. She'd noticed small changes over the past few weeks, things that felt like progress. The hums had grown more distinct. The little whispers were becoming clearer. Lena sat cross-legged on the floor, Ranger's head resting in her lap as she stroked his fur. Her eyes were soft, but there was an intensity in them that Dr. Harper hadn't seen before. It was as if Lena was no longer just observing the world from the sidelines, but was ready to participate in it once again. Dr. Harper smiled gently. "Lena, you've made such incredible progress. I'm so proud of you. How are you feeling today?" Lena didn't respond right away. Instead, she glanced down at Ranger, who shifted slightly, pressing his nose against her leg as if reassuring her. Lena's gaze remained on him for a moment longer, and then she nodded slightly. She didn't speak, but the subtle shift in her body language told Dr. Harper everything she needed to know. "Do you think you could try something for me today?" Dr. Harper asked, her voice kind but encouraging. "Maybe we could say a few words together, just you and Ranger." Lena hesitated, but then gave a small nod. She leaned forward, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, and took a deep breath. Ranger remained still, his presence like a comforting anchor beside her. "I think we can do it," Dr. Harper said softly, watching Lena with gentle encouragement. With that, Lena looked at Ranger again. Her fingers tightened around his paw as she whispered, "Sit." The word was strained, but it was there, spoken aloud, not just in thought. Ranger immediately obeyed, sitting calmly at her side. Lena's shoulders relaxed, a tiny flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. Dr. Harper clapped her hands together. "That's wonderful, Lena. You're doing amazing." Lena's lips quivered slightly, as though she were trying to hold back something more. There was a sense of anticipation in the room, an unspoken hope that this moment would spark the next. Ranger nuzzled her hand gently, sensing the moment of quiet triumph. For a few long moments, Lena sat still, staring at the floor, her thoughts a tangled web of emotions she couldn't yet untangle. She had tried so hard to push through the barrier that had kept her from speaking, from sharing herself with the world. But it felt so much safer with Ranger beside her. With him, she didn't feel so alone. "I know it's hard, Lena," Dr. Harper said softly, "but you don't have to do it all at once. Just take your time. You've already come so far." Lena looked up, meeting the therapist's gaze. There was a silent understanding between them, one that had only grown since Lena had first begun to open up with Ranger by her side. It wasn't just about finding her voice anymore. It was about trusting herself again. As the session came to an end, Lena stood and walked toward the door, Ranger following closely behind. Dr. Harper smiled as she watched them go, knowing that the bond between the girl and her dog was something truly special. It wasn't just the quiet connection that had made Lena's progress possible. It was the faith Ranger had in her, the way he had gently pulled her back into the world when she had been on the edge of giving up. That evening, Lena and Ranger sat by the window, watching the world beyond their small house. The soft glow of the setting sun cast a golden light across the landscape, and the wind rustled the trees in the distance. For a moment, everything felt still. Lena reached out, resting her hand on Ranger's back. Her fingers curled into his. Fur, the texture grounding her, reminding her of how far she had come since that first day at the shelter. She could feel the weight of the silence around her, but it wasn't as heavy as it once was. The quiet no longer felt like an obstacle. Instead, it had become a space for understanding, for connection. Lena closed her eyes for a moment, and as she did, she felt something stir deep inside her, a sensation that had been buried for so long. She could feel the words inside her, waiting to be freed. Taking a deep breath, she whispered softly, "Ranger, sit." The word was clearer this time, stronger. It still wasn't perfect, but it was more than just a whisper. It was a promise. A promise that she would find her voice, one word at a time. Ranger turned his head, locking eyes with her. His amber gaze was unwavering, steady, as if to say, "I'm here, always." And for the first time in a long while, Lena believed it. The early, morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting soft patterns on the floor. Lena sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of warm tea. Her mother, Sarah, moved around the kitchen, preparing breakfast, but Lena's attention was elsewhere. She was watching Ranger. The German shepherd lay beside her, his head resting on her feet, his eyes half closed in contentment. Lena's fingers traced the rim of her mug, her mind racing. Her progress with speaking had been slow, but the breakthrough she'd experienced in Dr. Harper's office felt like the first real crack in a wall that had kept her silent for so long. "Lena, sweetie," her mother said softly, glancing over her shoulder. "Would you like some toast?" Lena didn't answer right away, but she gave a small nod, her eyes lingering on Ranger as he lifted his head slightly, his ears twitching at the faint sound of Sarah's voice. "You know, Ranger's been such a good boy," Sarah continued as she placed a piece of toast on Lena's plate. "He's really helped you. I can see how much more at ease you are around him." Lena smiled, a quiet smile, but one that was filled with meaning. She didn't need to say it. Sarah could see it in the way Lena looked at Ranger, the way she would reach out to him without thinking, the way they communicated with nothing more than shared glances or small gestures. Ranger was more than just a dog. He was her anchor. Lena took a deep breath, feeling the familiar weight of the silence around her. It had always been a part of her life, but now it felt different. It wasn't something to be afraid of anymore. It was something she could navigate, something she could begin to shape. And there was something else too, a feeling deep within her that grew stronger every day. She didn't know how to describe it, but it was as if her voice was there, just out of reach, waiting for the right moment to surface. Later that afternoon, Lena and Ranger walked through the park. The air was cool, but not uncomfortable, and the park was quiet. Only a few people scattered across the walking paths. Lena held the leash in her hands, her fingers clenched tightly around it, but her grip wasn't as tense as it used to be. Ranger trotted ahead, his tail swinging low as he led the way. Lena followed, keeping pace with him, her eyes focused on the ground in front of her. There was a part of her that wanted to speak, wanted to let the words spill out, but it still felt like something was holding her back. She stopped by the bench near the old oak tree, where she had often sat in the past with her mother. The sound of children laughing in the distance made her tense up for a moment, but Ranger gave a soft whine and nudged her hand with his nose. She reached down, petting him softly, and he sat at her feet, looking up at her with those deep amber eyes, as though waiting for something. Lena took a deep breath, staring at the ground, her mind swirling with emotions she couldn't express. It was then that she remembered something her therapist, Dr. Harper, had said during their last session. Sometimes we need to feel safe enough to let the words come. But you can't force it, Lena. Just let it happen. Lena closed her eyes, her heart beating faster as the weight of the words resonated within her. Maybe she didn't need to force it. Maybe all she had to do was trust herself, trust Ranger, and let it flow when the time was right. That evening, as Lena and Ranger sat on the couch, she found herself feeling the same quiet anticipation that had filled her that morning. The house was still, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional rustling of Ranger's tail. Her mother, sitting across from them, was reading a book, but her eyes kept flicking up to check on Lena. She'd seen her daughter make so much progress in the last few weeks, and though she was careful not to push, she couldn't help but feel hopeful. Lena was ready. Sarah knew it. She could see the change in her, the way she no longer withdrew into herself, the way she allowed Ranger to pull her out of her shell, inch by inch. Ranger, for his part, was as calm as always. He leaned against Lena's side, his head resting on her lap as she absent-mindedly ran her fingers through his fur. His presence had become her comfort, her reassurance. "Ranger," Lena whispered softly, the word barely escaping her lips. It was the first time she had spoken his name aloud. She looked at him, and there it was, a small, quiet smile that tugged at the corners of her mouth. Ranger's ears perked up, and he looked up at her with a soft whine, as if to say, "I'm here. I always will be." Lena's chest tightened with emotion. She could feel the words building inside her, words she hadn't spoken in so long. She didn't know if she was ready to speak them just yet, but she felt the stirrings of something bigger, something that could change everything. The next morning, as they took their usual walk through the park, something unexpected happened. They were nearing the same bench near the oak tree when a small older woman came up to them, walking briskly. Her small dog, a scruffy terrier, was tugging at the leash. Lena froze for a moment, instinctively stepping back. The woman stopped when she noticed Lena's hesitation and smiled kindly. "Oh, don't worry, sweetheart. My dog is friendly. He's just a little excited." But the dog's loud barking sent a ripple of anxiety through Lena. She instinctively reached for Ranger's leash, but before she could react, Ranger stepped between Lena and the other dog. His posture was calm but firm, his body tense as he watched the small dog with a quiet intensity. Lena's fingers tightened around the leash, her heart racing. She could feel the panic rising inside her, a feeling she knew all too well. But then something happened. Ranger didn't bark, he didn't lunge or growl. Instead, he simply stood there, his body a silent barrier between Lena and the small dog. His presence was a reminder of the safety he had brought into her life. Lena took a deep breath, steadying herself, and for the first time in a long while she felt the words bubbling up just beneath the surface. "Ranger, sit," she whispered. The words were soft, but they were there, clear and distinct. Ranger immediately obeyed, sitting calmly at Lena's feet, his eyes never leaving the small dog as it wagged its tail. The woman blinked in surprise, clearly impressed by the dog's obedience. "Wow, he's well trained. You have a real connection with him." Lena nodded, though her voice remained silent. She didn't need to say anything else. The bond she shared with Ranger spoke louder than words ever could. The days after that, morning in the park felt like a turning point for Lena. Each new step she took with Ranger felt less like an act of courage and more like a gentle unfolding of something that had always been there, waiting. It was as if, with each passing day, the silence that had held her in its grip for so long loosened, just a little bit more. Lena didn't speak often, but when she did, it felt monumental. Her words were still small, still fragile, but they were there, soft, like whispers carried on the wind, but they were there. Sarah watched with quiet pride as her daughter continued to make progress. They had come a long way since the first day they had brought Ranger home. Sarah had never seen Lena, this relaxed, this willing to interact with the world around her. It was as if the bond between Lena and Ranger had opened a door that had long been locked. One evening, as Lena sat at the dining table working on her homework, Sarah came in with a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. It was addressed to Lena. "What's this?" Lena asked, her voice tentative but curious. "I'm not sure," Sarah replied, sitting down across from her. "It came in the mail today. No return address." Lena carefully tore off the paper, revealing a small, leather-bound journal. She opened it slowly, her fingers brushing over the first page, which was blank. "Do you like it?" Sarah asked softly. Lena smiled and nodded, her heart warming at the sight of the journal. It was beautiful, simple, but elegant. A place where she could write, a place to express herself when words felt too difficult to say. Lena's eyes met her mother's, and she felt a surge of emotion. The journal felt like a gift of freedom, a way to connect with her own thoughts in a way that felt safe and private. "Thank you," Lena whispered, the words soft but sincere. Sarah smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You're welcome, sweetie." That night, after dinner, Lena took the journal with her to the living room. She curled up on the couch with Ranger by her side, the warmth of his presence calming her. For a long time she simply sat there, the journal in her hands, unsure of what to write. But then, something clicked. She opened to the first page and began to write. "Dear journal, it's hard to explain what I feel sometimes. There are days when I want to talk, but I can't. It's like there's a wall inside of me that keeps me from saying the words. But with Ranger, it's different. He understands me in a way no one else does. When I'm with him, I don't need to speak. We just know each other." She paused for a moment, her pen hovering over the page, unsure of how to continue. But then she found herself writing again. "I think I'm ready. To speak, I mean. Not all the time, but sometimes. I know it's going to take time, but I feel like I can do it now. Ranger's helped me more than anyone else. He's the reason I'm not afraid anymore. Maybe one day I'll be able to tell him what he means to me, but for now, I'll just write it here." Lena set the pen down, feeling a weight lift from her chest. She closed the journal and placed it on the table beside her. Ranger shifted, his head resting on her lap, as he looked up at her with those gentle eyes. She smiled down at him, her hand brushing through his fur. "Thank you, Ranger," she whispered, though the words felt unnecessary. He already knew. The next morning, Lena woke up early, as she always did. She had always been an early riser, but lately it was becoming a habit that she didn't mind. It was quiet, peaceful, a time when she could be alone with her thoughts, with Ranger by her side. She stood by the window, staring out at the street below. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm, golden light over everything. The day felt full of potential, like a fresh start. Lena turned to Ranger, who was sitting nearby, watching her with calm, unwavering attention. She took a deep breath and walked over to him, kneeling down so that she was eye-level with him. "Ranger," she said softly, her voice still tentative but strong enough to be heard. "I know I don't say it much, but you're my best friend. I trust you more than anyone." Ranger's ears perked up at the sound of his name, and he gave a soft, almost imperceptible whine, as if to acknowledge her words. His tail gave a slow wag, and Lena's heart swelled with gratitude. For a moment she just sat there, breathing in the stillness of the morning, allowing the silence between them to settle like a comfort. There were no expectations, no pressure, just the two of them, sharing a quiet moment, but something inside her stirred, something she couldn't quite explain. It was as if all the words she had been holding inside were suddenly ready to come out. "Ranger," Lena said again, her voice trembling slightly but growing stronger with each word. "I love you." The words were simple, but they held a depth of meaning that Lena couldn't have fully understood until now. She had always been afraid of her voice, afraid of what it meant to speak, but with Ranger by her side, she felt braver than she ever had before. Ranger's eyes softened, and he leaned in, his head resting gently against her. Lena's chest tightened with emotion, and for the first time in years, she felt like she had finally found her voice. Quiet, yes, but there, steady and true. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid to let it be heard. The weeks that followed felt like a blur of small victories. Lena continued to write in her journal, her thoughts pouring out onto the pages as she began to process everything she had kept inside for so long. She spoke more often, though it was still a struggle at times, but with Ranger beside her, the fear slowly ebbed away. He was her steady companion, her silent support. They were a team, and nothing could break the bond they shared. And one day, as Lena stood in the park once more, she realized something important. She wasn't just healing. She was growing. With Ranger at her side, she was learning to trust in herself, in her own strength. The silence no longer felt like a prison. It was just part of who she was, a part that she was learning to navigate in her own time, in her own way. She looked down at Ranger, who was watching her intently, as if waiting for her next move. "I'm ready," she said softly, almost to herself. Ranger's ears perked up as if he understood. And in that moment, Lena knew that together they could face anything. The next few weeks felt like a new chapter in Lena's life, one that had begun the day she first met Ranger, but was now blossoming into something deeper, more profound. She had always been a quiet child, one who lived within her thoughts, her emotions, and the silence that had once been her constant companion. But with Ranger at her side, that silence no longer defined her. As she made progress in speaking, even if it was just a word here and there, Lena began to notice changes in herself, subtle shifts like the light breaking through a fog. It wasn't always easy, but each small step felt like an accomplishment. Each time she spoke, even if it was just to say thank you or good morning, it felt like reclaiming a piece of herself she had lost along the way. One chilly morning, Sarah stood in the kitchen, a warm cup of tea in her hands, as she watched her daughter outside. Lena was sitting cross-legged on the lawn. Ranger sprawled at her feet, his head resting in her lap. It was a peaceful scene. The sunlight, filtering through the trees and casting long shadows across the grass. The bond between them was unmistakable, so strong and unspoken that it seemed to radiate from them both. Sarah had always known how much Lena needed a companion, but she hadn't anticipated the depth of the connection that would form between her daughter and Ranger. It wasn't just about the dog being there for her. It was about how Lena had found the courage to face her own fears, to speak when the silence had once been suffocating. And it was because of Ranger, her unshakable, constant friend, that Lena was able to take those first tentative steps into a world she had been too afraid to enter. As Sarah gazed out the window, a thought crossed her mind. How long had it been since she had heard Lena speak so much, since she had laughed without hesitation, smiled without reservation? She couldn't remember the last time it had felt like this, like Lena was finally starting to believe in herself again. Lena stood up, brushing off the grass from her pants as Ranger followed her, his tail wagging excitedly. They began to walk around the yard, Lena throwing a ball for him to chase. Sarah watched, her heart swelling with pride and love for both of them. It was incredible how much they had healed each other. The bond they shared had grown so natural that Sarah had almost forgotten how much they had struggled at the beginning. There were no more days of silence or withdrawal. Lena was speaking more, laughing more, and even beginning to interact with the world in ways she never had before. But it wasn't just Lena who had changed. Sarah had too. Seeing her daughter grow stronger, more confident, had reminded Sarah of how resilient humans could be when they had the right support, when they had someone to stand by them. It had reminded her of her own strength, of her ability to be the support Lena needed. She had become a better listener, a more patient mother, and most importantly, she had allowed herself to lean on the love they shared as a family. That night, as Sarah sat in the living room reading a book, Lena came in quietly, holding something behind her back. She had a small, tentative smile on her face, and her eyes sparkled with something Sarah had seen before, but hadn't quite understood until now. Pride. "Mom?" Lena asked, her voice soft but full of purpose. It was the kind of voice Sarah had hoped to hear for so long. "Yes, sweetheart?" Sarah looked up, her heart skipping a beat at the change in Lena's tone. I want to tell you something," Lena said, her hands trembling slightly as she brought them out from behind her back, revealing the small journal Sarah had given her weeks ago. "I've been writing," Lena continued, her voice growing steadier with each word, "about how I feel, and I think it's time I share it with you." Sarah's eyes widened as Lena carefully opened the journal, flipping to a page she had marked with a ribbon. She took a deep breath, her hands resting lightly on the pages, as she looked up at her mother. "This is the hardest thing I've ever done," Lena began, her voice cracking only slightly. "But I want you to know, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid of speaking. I'm not afraid of the world outside. I just needed to find the courage, and I think I've found it." Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes, her heart swelling with emotions she hadn't even known she'd been holding inside. She nodded for Lena to continue. Lena cleared her throat, then began to read aloud. "Mom, thank you. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Thank you for helping me find my voice, even when I was too scared to use it. I may not always say the right words, but I know I'll find them when it matters. You've always been there, and that's what's made the difference. I know now that I can face anything because I have you and Ranger, and that makes all the difference." Lena's voice trembled at the last part, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She didn't speak for a moment, overwhelmed by the raw honesty and strength in her daughter's words. Finally, Sarah reached out and pulled Lena into a tight embrace. She whispered, "I'm so proud of you, Lena. So proud of you." Lena's arms wrapped around her mother, and for a long moment they simply held each other. It was a moment of healing, of understanding, of acceptance. The silence between them was comfortable now, not empty, and Lena knew that it was only a part of who she was, not something that defined her. She had found her voice, yes, but it was only one piece of the journey. What mattered most was that she had learned to speak her truth, to trust herself, and to know that she was worthy of being heard. And as she looked at Ranger, lying contentedly by her side, Lena smiled. She knew that the bond they shared had made all of this possible. With him by her side, she had found the courage to move beyond her fears, beyond her limitations, and together they would continue on this path, wherever it led. In the stillness of that moment, with Ranger by her side, Lena knew that the silence had never been the enemy. It was simply a part of her journey, a journey that was far from over, but now it was a journey she would face with confidence, with strength, and with the love of those who truly understood her. And in that moment, Lena was more certain than ever that the world had much more to offer than she had ever imagined. All she had to do was keep moving forward, one step at a time.